Guys, we are nearing the finish line. Some of you guys are been along pretty much the whole ride. And so thank you for your persistence, your stamina, whatever you want to call it. But for me, this has been a hugely transforming series. I've read through the Gospel of John plenty of times, but I've never actually worked my way through it in that in-depth, detailed way. Great news about me having to preach is that, I got to work through it in an in-depth, detailed kind of way. Otherwise, it's a really short sermon that no one likes. So you guys might not mind the short sermon part, but no one likes the part. I don't think you can throw it with. But it's just been this ride, man. I really felt from the beginning God wanted me to emphasize this concept. God is with us. I kind of tried to build this whole thing in a kind of a series, kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with the theme of with being the main thing, what's being driven at time and time again. No matter what we're going through, no matter if we're looking at some of Jesus' miracles or some of his teachings or just the conversations between him and his disciples, it just keeps coming back down to this fact that John really wanted us to understand this idea that God is with us. And he wrote the whole book so that we would believe that Jesus wasn't just some ordinary traveling teacher. He was more than that. He was more than the best one that there ever has been. He's God wrapped up in human flesh. And that has made all the difference in the world. It made the difference in me, and I know you guys can vouch and say the same thing. So that's kind of the vein we're going to continue in. And just kind of remind where we're at in John. In 19, we read all about the crucifixion of Jesus. So when we start things up today in chapter 20, Jesus is dead and buried. And for anyone else, that's the end of the story. I mean, the fat lady, his son, that's all she wrote. It's the end. And they didn't all live happily ever after. And if all he was a teacher, that would be the end of the story. That would be when they didn't live happily ever after, and they took some of his teachings and tried to live better lives. And Christianity isn't about trying to live a better life. It's about living every moment of our life in relationship with our Maker. It's not just a checklist of, oh, hey, did you go to church this week? Oh, I see. It's nothing like that. It's like, okay, I prayed this morning, and that got my mind started on him. So I decided to go ahead and open my Bible. I didn't have much time, so I just read a couple of verses. And so I got that. Maybe it was the verse of the day on the Bible app, which, do that. That's great. But whatever it is, it's like, okay, I got that. Okay, now that verse kind of tumbling around in my head all day long. And so I'm kind of thinking through what does it mean, and just, okay, God, why did you have this going in and out of my head all day? So whether you're at lunch, whether you're at work or at school or whatever it is that you're doing, that verse is playing through. Maybe some of the things you prayed about, maybe you had something causing you stress and anxiety, maybe a coworker, maybe a teacher, whatever it is. Hopefully you take that and you go and give it to God and say, okay, look, I can't deal with this. You are the one who says he's in charge and in control, so I'm just going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to trust you. That the result I end up getting is the result that I get. If you guys are anything like me, which I strongly suspect you are, you feel free to make requests. It's like, God, this is the ending I would prefer. This is how I would like things to work out. And sometimes it works out that way, but I'm level with you. Most of the time, it does not for me. Even if it works out most of the time the way you ask God for it to work out, I'm going to start giving you my prayer list, okay? As you're closer than I am, I guess. I don't know. But most of the time, it feels like God's saying, thanks for the input, Ross. No. Let's try it this way. and we're going to get to a good ending. And you know what? You're going to be a better person for it. And I don't like growing up. It's generally a painful process. It usually involves me having to sacrifice something that I don't want to sacrifice, whether it's 5 minutes of my time or this whole thing that I really enjoy. But usually I have to lay something down. God says, "Thank you. I'm going to take that and I'm going to exchange it for something that's better." So maybe God took away your ability to go play golf 2-3 times a week, and He said, instead, you're going to, help your neighbor mow their lawn. I don't know, whatever it is. I don't like mowing lawns. Never have. It was never quite on the level of, okay, I'm being punished, and my punishment is mowing the lawn. But, I lived in Phoenix, and I had to do landscaping through one summer in Phoenix. And I can tell you that 123 degrees in Scottsdale, Arizona was not fun. And the heat just sucked the life out of me. So getting paid to mow lawns was a little bit better, but it still was not fun. But it was better than music, I guess. But anyway, point is, God gives us things. We got to roll with it. And when we go along with His plan, and we willingly say, "Okay, God, it's not going to be my way. I get that. We're going to do it your way. And just teach me whatever it is that you want me to learn." Things go so much better. If we're willingly listening and growing with the things that God puts us through, then it really does. It goes so much better. And on the outside, especially, like if the unbelieving world is looking in, they're going to be like, "Oh, where's your God? I thought He was going to make everything better, right?" And you're like, "Well, yes, but in the way you're thinking, no." Because He doesn't make things easy. He makes things better. And there's a difference between the two. Sometimes we do get that. I'm so thankful for it. God lets us catch our breath, recover a little bit, heal, maybe let some of the scars heal, I don't know, whatever. But we get that break and like, okay, I'm ready for round 2. Or whatever it is. But the point is that we go on. And God doesn't let us sit there in that comfortable space for very long. And so having this book has been helpful to me in the hard times that I've come through, because, again, it reminds me that God is with me every step of the way. And even when emotionally it feels like He's not, He really is. So I really want to dwell on that. But I'm just getting into, again, the story, is that chapter 20 is going to start off with Jesus being out of the picture, basically. Again, He's died. He's been dead for 3 days now. Friday afternoon, Friday night, all day Saturday night. Here we are, Sunday morning, pretty much gone. And the people who've been following Him, who watched Him get arrested, dragged before sham trial, and sham trial, and another sham trial, and another sham trial. I think he had like 5 trials. And not all of them were basically rigged. The Roman governor was the only one who was like, "I'm willing to set this guy free because he hasn't done anything wrong." Everyone else got the politics of the situation. In fact, that Jesus was escorted to this trial by an angry mob. They got the hint. It's like, okay, we need to railroad this guy. And so either they had nothing to do with it, like Herod basically was like, "Yeah, go send him back to the Roman governor. I don't want to have anything to do with it." But they just, in the end, he was crucified. Which at that point in history was the most horrible and humiliating way to die. And we've got an angry mob that is literally shouting, "Crucify Him." All those people that were following Jesus, and they scattered. They were concerned for their own lives, and they had good reason to be, because it's not unreasonable to think that after they killed the leader, they're going to go after the followers next. Absolutely reasonable. So they scattered for the most part. There's like Peter, we read about his account where he kind of got close to Jesus. but he wasn't willing to own up to knowing who he was. He's like, I'm just here with the rest of the mob, okay? I'm just here for the ride. Not everyone wants a good execution, right? Lots of fun. That's basically what Peter was trying to do, is just pretend to be one of the crowd. John, on the other hand, he goes in and he's there. He's there in the court while Jesus is being trialed. He's following along as closely as he can. When Jesus dies on the cross, John is right there at the foot of that cross with Jesus' mother. But the point is that these people are all entirely scared. We've got the 12 disciples, and one of them, of course, is the one, Judas Iscariot. He betrayed Jesus. He's out of the picture. He's committed suicide by this. But the other 11, along with some other followers, like Mary Magdalene, well, it's like 3 different Marys, maybe 4. Popular name. But at any rate, they're all scared. There's a good measure of despair, because not only are they scared for their lives, but everything they've been following with Jesus, everything they've been hoping for in Jesus has been thrown away as far as they can see. It's all gone. Everything. It's pointless now without Jesus. And so they're in this pit, and they don't see a way out. And so that's where they're at. That's where we're going to pick up. So let's go ahead and read John chapter 20. We're going to start in verse 1, okay? All right, here we go. It says, early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, they've taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him. Now, just one pause right there, sure. But if you haven't noticed it before, you don't remember me talking about it. Anytime you see about that phrase, the other disciple, or the disciple Jesus loved, a lot of people feel like that was John's way of being humble, not naming himself and everything like that. I'm not sure in our culture that comes across very humbly. To me, it almost feels like I was Jesus' favorite. Yeah, you know it. Everybody knows it. I was a favorite. Just get over it, doesn't it? I don't think that's the way he meant it, but I could be wrong. Regardless.
Sorry, just one quick thing on that, because I had a commentary that said that word that it also could be used as the one that Jesus saved. Oh. So that's where a lot of times the humbling part is, because it can be also translated as saved.
There you go. I like that. I have not read that.
Yeah, I actually just read it recently, so such a time as this.
I'll take it. So, at any rate, so anytime you see the other disciple or the disciple Jesus loved, maybe it's translated to saving, or I don't know. But anyway, the point is that it's talking about John. So, she ran, found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, they've taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. So if he was being humble, there's a little bit of braggadocio here. But yep, they're not with their Peters. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that had said Jesus must rise from the dead. Then they went home. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stooped and looked in. She saw 2 white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. Dear Lord, why are you crying? The angels asked her. Because they've taken away my Lord, she replied, and I don't know where they have put him. She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. Dear woman, why are you crying? Jesus asked her. Who are you looking for? She thought he was the gardener. Sir, she said, if you've taken him away, tell me where you put him, and I will go get him. Mary, Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, Rabboni, which is Hebrew for teacher. Don't cling to me, Jesus said, for I haven't yet ascended to my Father. But go find my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene had found the disciples and told them, I have seen the Lord. Then she gave them his message. So we've got kind of a lot that goes on here, okay? And I wanted to kind of get in on this. I forgot down. I asked Tanya to make a nice graphic for it, and I forgot to put it up on the screen. So you'll see it next week. But what it is, and I know I've talked about this occasionally, but it's a Japanese art form called kintsugi. Anyone familiar with that? Yep. Okay. So what it is, if you don't know, is that it's some piece of pottery. Maybe it's a bowl, maybe it's a plate, maybe it's a pitcher. Doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, it's broken. Okay? And what they do is they take it and then they use gold to glue it back together. And that piece of pottery becomes whole again. And it gains value because A, it's got precious metal in it now. Instead of clay, which is just about the cheapest thing on earth, because it is earth. But it's got gold in it now, which is one of the most precious metals we have. But it doesn't end there. Okay, it's also got the touch of words. Somebody took the time and energy to put it together. Sometimes it's really, really simple. It just, where the cracks are, you can see the gold, and it's pretty for that. I have seen pieces that it wasn't just the cracks filled in. The person created this almost this gold leaf kind of a design on top of it, maybe flowers or something like that. And so they took time not just to fix it, but to make it even more beautiful. And it, whether it's just repaired in a normal sense of the term, using gold as super glue, or whether it's got designs in it, either way, it's an artwork. It's no longer just a common piece of pottery. It's work of art. And that's what I love about this, because I wanted to call this little series where we finish up John, I wanted to call it Hope Again. Because remember the disciples, they're in a state of fear, panic, despair. All because the guy that they've been following, the guy that they've been centering their life around, sometimes for years, some of these people, he's dead now. I don't know if you've ever had something that was a part of your life, that was central, maybe even in your life, for years, and then suddenly it's gone. There's this hole in your life. And it takes a little time to readjust and figure out, okay, what's life about now? What's it going to be like? I got to figure out a new routine. I've got to figure out my big why again. There's this huge readjustment in our lives. And that's what these people are going through. Every single one of them is at a point of fear and despair. And their hope is gone. Just like that clay pot, it was taken, it was dropped on the floor and it shattered. And that's where their hope sits right now, maybe in a dustbin somewhere. This is one of those places where we see basically God taking the overarching story and then he steps in and says, but God. And we start seeing verses like God, rich in mercy. He takes those broken pieces and starts putting them back together, sometimes before we even know. This was kind of a grand unveiling thing. And the kicker of it is, they should have known. I'm going to take a look really quick. It's in each one of the Gospels. I'm going to take you to the book of Matthew. So Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16. Page 20, verse 21, Matthew 16, 21. All right? Keep your finger in John. We are going to that. So, it says, from then on, Jesus began telling his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, he would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead. Now, if you go to Mark and Luke, you can find this basically the same verse. It's actually Jesus telling them the exact same thing. But I picked Matthew because he tells us that this wasn't just a one-off comment. He says, from then on, Jesus began telling us. From this point on, Jesus emphasized to his disciples, I'm going to die at the hands of the elders in Jerusalem. And then 3 days later, I will be raised from the dead. And they heard it. Who knows how many times? Maybe just like, 3, 4 times. I don't know. Maybe 300-400 times. We don't know. We don't get everything Jesus told us in the Bible. So we just get little snippets here and there. Remember, this is 3.5-year periods that we're talking about that Jesus taught. We don't have 3.5 years worth of conversations and sermons and whatever else. We got little bits here, little bits there, sermon here, parable there, all that. Anyway, he gets in there and he just tells them, hey, I'm going to die. I'm going to be raised back to life. Okay? They knew. But still, what we get here is so interesting to me because these people, again, Jesus having died and having spent 3 days hiding, and probably not all together, because when we look in at John and we see Mary go back, she finds Peter and John. It doesn't say she finds the disciples. It says she finds Peter and John. So they're probably hiding in different locations. The old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. There you go. That's what they're doing. They're scattered out, trying to minimize what they're expecting as far as a loss of life. If they find this hiding spot, well, they're only getting 3 of us. If they find this hiding spot, they're only getting 1. They're scattered. But here's what I really want you guys to know is that hope, when it breaks, it causes deep pain. Have you ever had someone promise you something? Maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a spouse, I don't know. They promised you something, and they broke that promise, and you had a lot of hopes in it. It hurts. It hurts deeply. But if someone you trust on just every level, and they break it, what they said they were going to do, you had hope set in that. It hurts. But what if, like in this case anyway, what if your hope wasn't broken? What if it was your expectation or your interpretation of that promise that was broken? It's not the same thing. Because one thing, again, that I've learned is that God doesn't do things the way that I've expected him to do most often. He has his own way of going at it. And it's not going to be the same. What works for one person is not going to work for another person. Sometimes God picks it for even reasons other than that. It's like, this worked for this person, and it might well work for you, but he's going to take us down a different road anyway. But we build up these expectations. We build up these interpretations of God's promises. And the disciples were no different. They had expectations. They had hopes. They had interpretations of what Jesus said. How many of them thought that, I can't help but wonder, how many of them thought that, okay, he's talking symbolically? Because let's face it, we have the old saying here in the U.S., there's 2 sure things in life, death and taxes, right? You're not getting around those things. Well, they understand the inevitability of death, that it comes for all of us. It's a fact of life that is inescapable. And so how many of them, I can't help but wonder, it's like, oh, he's talking about death. Maybe he's like being purely symbolic. Or maybe he'll be like beaten within an inch of his life and he'll recover. Something like that. But like dead is dead. We don't come back from that, right? I don't see any reason why they would have thought differently. And I think you can see in their reactions a lot of that as well. So let's take a look. Let's get in. Let's drill a little deeper into John chapter 4. All right? So here we go. Early Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to a tomb and found the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. Now, right there, I want to pause because this is one of those places that if you're just reading and you're not thinking your way through it, you're going to miss out. Because the very fact that it was Mary Magdalene who was there is amazing. We know for a fact that Mary Magdalene was at one point in time possessed by 7 demons, and Jesus cast those demons out. Now, I don't know about you guys, but human nature typically thinks if she had that kind of demon possession going on in her life, we're like, what the heck did she do to bring that on? I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that that's kind of the normal way of thinking. What did she do to bring this on herself? Because we typically, we do something and it kind of opens our lives up to that sort of demonic activity. Not always, but often, usually. And so a woman who'd gone through that, you got questions about. A lot of people believe that Mary Magdalene was basically excuse me, blunt, she was a whore. And that she was another Mary who had come into a nice dinner party where Jesus had been invited by one of the Pharisees. And if you've read through the Gospels, you know that that was not a normal event. Jesus usually ate with tax collectors or harlots, you know. He ate with the people that were outcast from society. The proper society people, they did not ask Jesus over for dinner very often. Here he was at a proper dinner party, and someone named Mary, who the Bible tells us was a whore, came in and wept at Jesus' feet, washed his feet. So all the dust, all the donkey manure, anything else that was on his feet, she cried tears to wash his feet, and then got some super expensive perfume, poured that on him, and it was a super lavish gift. A lot of people think that was Mary Magdalene. We don't know that for sure. That's a very common thought. So it could well be her. We don't know. But regardless, she was one of those outliers, one of the people who is not an accepted part of society. And so for her to be one of the first people to see Jesus resurrected, to be trusted, when the culture of the Hebrews was, if you've got a trial going on and you need material witnesses to come forward and testify to whatever it is that happened, women didn't count. Your testimony, you might as well have a dog bark, okay? It was that worthwhile to Jewish mindsets. It didn't matter. Women were largely, they weren't actually property in a slave sense of the term, but they might as well have been. They weren't valued. You didn't talk to anyone outside of your family unless you were like in a home setting and you were at a party or whatever, and you could talk then. But, you know, like just passing people on the street, you didn't say hi to a member of the opposite sex. Unless it was your cousin, your brother, or someone like that. It didn't happen. And so again, for Mary to be chosen, make no mistake, she was chosen by God himself. He could have revealed himself at any point to anyone. We see this because later on, Jesus literally appears in the middle of the room. So distance wasn't a problem. Walls weren't a problem. None of it was an issue for Jesus. He could have revealed himself to anyone at any point in time. He weren't. But he chose Mary and some other ladies. People who Hebrew tradition dismissed. So right there, that's something that's a big deal. So, see that, and so let's go ahead and carry on. So she ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, "They've taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived and went inside, and he noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For until then, they hadn't understood scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. Then they went home. This is such an interesting little part of it. I mean, so Mary does her job. She doesn't know about Jesus being alive yet. She just knows that his body's gone. So she goes back. She finds two people who are Jesus' closest disciples, and she gets them. And they run to the tomb, and they walk in. Now, what's interesting to me is that you don't really catch it in English. You got to get into some of the original Greek that this book was written in. You basically get two reactions. You see Peter walk in. Oh, you see John arrived first. He doesn't go into the tomb for whatever reason. Maybe as a Jew, he was afraid of being unclean because, touching a dead body or going places that dead bodies were. I mean, we get kind of grossed out by it, but they have a series of laws that says that they're unclean, so they had another reason to be grossed out by it. So maybe that was it. I kind of don't think so. Personally, I think it was probably a matter of maybe scared, maybe he's like, something's going on. I don't know. I'm just going to wait for my friend. He was creepy. I don't know. Who knows? But regardless, he waits for Peter. Peter, being the bold, rash person that he is, just jumps right on in, goes into the tomb, and it says he looks her. Let's see, how did it say? When Simon Peter arrived and went inside, he also noticed the linen wrappings lying there. Version I typically like to read and study in basically said that Peter walked in and he saw the wrappings. Okay, and then a little bit later we see John go in and he sees the wrappings. And so you kind of, if you're just reading English, you see the word here. We see noticed and then see. It's totally easy to miss, but they're two very different words. Okay. Matter of fact, when it talks about Peter going in, he saw the wrappings or noticed the wrappings. The Greek word it uses is what you're probably going to say. It sounds an awful lot like, but it's theoreo, which is where we get the word theory or theorize. This isn't just him coming in and going, oh, hey, look, there's stuff on there. No, he's like stopping. He's looking. He's thinking through. Okay, he's got his rational part of his brain flipped on, and he's playing the detective. What's happened? What's going on? Why are the linens that he was wrapped in lying like that? And he's trying to figure things out. Okay, very rational reaction. Okay, John comes in and he has some emotional thing that stops him from going into to begin with. But once Peter's in, he steps in and he also sees. But we don't see the word theoreo there. We see parao, which means to see with the mind, to perceive, or to know. So, whereas Peter has a rational reaction, he starts thinking through. He plays the detective, if you will. John sees and has a spiritual connection. That's why we see it go on, and it doesn't talk about this with Peter, but it does with John. It says, then the disciple who had reached the turn first also went in, and he saw and believed. He didn't have a rational reaction. He had a spiritual reaction. I find that really interesting, don't you? Because, let's face it, especially those of us who are married, we get it. There's one person who's wired one way, and then there's another person who's wired the other way. Almost never do we marry someone who's wired to think the same way as us. It's insane because you hear about what people are looking for in a romantic partner. Usually we talk about things we have in common, right? And we do. We want some things in common, but we end up with people who come to the same problem and we tackle it two entirely different ways. So it's like so different that it's like you're weirding me out the way you're dealing with this. And I think you're doing it wrong. It works. I can't argue with that, but it's wrong anyway. This is the way we do things. And it doesn't take marriage to figure this out. We can have anyone we're close to, okay, that we start dealing with common problems with. We start going like, huh, I wouldn't have thought about it like that. Okay, all right, I get it. Okay, let's deal with the problem from your standpoint this time. And you know, this is Peter and John. They have two different reactions, two different thought processes. Peter engages his brain. John engages his soul. That's not where it all ends, because we don't just get Peter and John's reaction. We go back, kind of, they take it all in. John believes, I really honestly think that they had a conversation on the way back, and that John kind of explained, and I think Peter believed as well, on that way home. We're not told, that's speculative, but I think we can see later on that Peter does believe. By the time he gets back and he's relaying things to the other disciples, he believes that Jesus was here. But we still got Mary, okay? She's still in the picture, because while she went and got them, that's not where her story ends. She didn't just say, okay, they're on the job, I'm going to leave it. She goes back as well. She's getting by as far as we know. So, verse 11. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stooped and looked in. She saw two white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had lying. Dear woman, why are you crying? The angels asked her. Because they've taken away my Lord, she replied, and I don't know where they put him. She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. Dear woman, why are you crying? Jesus asked her. Who are you looking for? I just love it. Because, I mean, Jesus knows what's going on. And I can't, I can't say for sure, but I honestly think that she was crying so hard that she couldn't see straight. Ever had so many tears in your eyes that you literally just can't see what's going on? You got vague shapes and everything. So I can see there's a person in front of me, but I can't tell who it is. That's the sort of thing I think. Okay, so Peter sees, engages his brain. John sees, engages his soul. Mary comes, she engages her emotions. None of these reactions is wrong. That's one thing I want you to understand. None of them are wrong. Every single one of these people, by the time they get back to the disciples, believes that Jesus has risen. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the way we're wired. Okay? And this is true. You start hearing people giving their testimony, and you start to hear, oh, well, I was raised in church, and I heard, and I went down when I was, 10 years old, and prayed, and accepted the Lord into my heart, and I got baptized, and I lived a good, lived as a Christian for pretty much my whole life, You hear stories like that, and then you hear the guy who's like, oh, well, I went to church, and I didn't like what I saw, so I left, and I got into drugs, and I got into drugs hardcore, and I left all my family and all my friends and all the possessions. I gave it all up for drugs, and they get down to what addicts call rock bottom, and that's when they look up and they see God, and they're like, oh, I've been missing out all this time, and they met God on those terms. And you get all kinds of stories, all these different reactions, and it's all fine, because what's the end result? Belief. Well, that's what John wrote this book for. As a matter of fact, at the very end of the chapter, I'll just skip down to the end. I didn't put this in here. But in chapter 20, verse 30, he says, the disciples saw Jesus do many other miraculous signs in addition to the ones recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, Son of God, and that by believing in him, you'll have life by the power of his name. This is why John wrote it. Okay? He didn't write it so that we would go, oh, hey, that's cool. He wrote it so we would believe. That's John's whole point. And so that's the end goal. This is the only thing that makes a Christian's life actually, truly Christian. Because I love what Tony Evans, pastor out in Dallas, says. He says, you can go to church and call yourself a Christian. That doesn't make you a Christian any more than sitting in a garage makes you a car. You can go to church your whole life and never be a Christian. Never. This is one reason, not the only reason, sadly, but this is one of the reasons why so many people have church hurt stories. Because churches are filled with people who think they're Christians, but aren't. Because it's not just, oh, hey, I believe there's God, and I believe there's a Jesus, and God on the cross. It's like, okay, this is a belief that has become so central to my life that I'm going to wrap my life around this thing. That's the belief that God's talking about. It's not casual. It's not something that works for 2 hours on Sunday morning and then we go home and do our own thing. That's not belief. That's not what God's talking about when He's talking about if you believe in me, you'll have eternal life. There's nothing casual. It's just like the disciples who for years had wrapped their life around Jesus, left family, left friends, left vocations, left everything behind so they could just be close to Jesus and hear what He had to say. And hopefully they'd end up to be more like Him. That's what they're going for. Love that. So, how these three people, none of them reacted in a wrong way. There's more ways to react than just those three. Let's face it. There's more than 3 personality types in the world, right? And it's all fine. The question is, where do we get out? When our hope gets scattered, when it's broken, when we have nothing, what comes? But what are we going to do? Who do we put our hope in? And the reality is that there are bet you money. There's somebody in this room, at least one somebody, probably a half dozen or more, that have put their trust in God and felt like God had let them down. And in a sense, He did. Because He didn't give us the answer we were looking for. Just like the disciples. They had an expectation of what God was going to do, of what Jesus' life was going to look like, and what following Him was going to look like. And when He died, that expectation was shattered. But God had a different plan. It wasn't what the disciples wanted. It wasn't what they thought was best. It was simply put, what God knew was best. Like I said, that's a hard road more often than it is easy. And that's the reality of things. But like I also said, is that it's a good journey. Because it's not just God saying, oh, hey, well, I know you wanted an easy answer, but I'm giving you a tough one. Good luck. Have fun with it. He doesn't leave us. He's right there walking us through every single step of the way. He knows what you're feeling. He knows the anger that brews in our hearts when we don't get the answer we want. He knows that. We're not hiding it from Him. We're not tricking Him into thinking, oh, hey, Jesus, I'm okay with it, really, when you're not. He gets it. He knows. He understands because He's right there with us. He sees those looks on our face, that knee-jerk reaction you have when you first get the answer you didn't want. It's kind of like, when you're a kid and you get served that meal that you don't like, or maybe it's broccoli or meatloaf or I don't know, whatever it is, close to you. And it's kind of like maybe you're at a friend's house and they serve up that thing you don't like. And you're going to be polite. It's like, I love these people. They're my friend. It's my friend and their mom. They work to fix me a meal. I'm going to be polite and I'm going to eat it no matter what it is. But you've got that look on your face. You put that first bite in your mouth and your face can't help but be honest. You don't like it. And they see it. And if they got their heads screwed on straight, they'll realize, okay, they're trying for me. I appreciate that. It's the same sort of thing with us and God. He knows. He gets our reactions. He wants to walk us through. But there's a finish line. And wherever that finish line is for us, there's points in time. Who was I talking about this week? Said that it's uphill. Yeah, it's uphill most of the way. I said, the beautiful thing about having an uphill journey is that every once in a while you stop, turn around, and catch the wind. It's beautiful. But then you turn around and you start climbing up the hill. It's still hard. I'm trying to say that it's not. If anything, I'm trying to let you understand that it's going to be hard, because I don't want you to come in thinking that it's going to be easy. It's going to be good, but it's not going to be easy. He is God with us. He's with us every step of the way. And our broken hopes, our expectations, well, he takes the broken hope, and that's what he fixes and makes more beautiful than ever. It's minus our expectations or our interpretations, the stuff that we've attached to it. He takes that, he breaks that off, he gets rid of it, and makes it into something good and beautiful and useful. That's the way God works. I love that about it. He doesn't just take it and fix it, he makes it better than it ever was. That is a God of all. That is a God that's worth wrapping my life around. Because yes, there's going to be some hurts along the way, but you know what? I've seen him work in other people's life. I've seen him work in my life. I've read the Bible, and I've seen how people have been hurt, and yet it still ends up better in the end. He's faithful. He's with us every step of the way. We can't give it. Let's pray. Lord God, I come to you, and I just have to humbly admit that you know what goes on in my heart. The despair, the disappointment, everything else that goes on when I don't get my way. We both know I'm pretty vocal about my opinions. But you're good. You're faithful every step of the way, and I know that your way really is the best. I've seen it work out in ways that I never expected, with a result that was better than I hoped for. Sometimes it's not necessarily better than what I hoped for, but it's different, and it's still good. I'm okay with it. I trust you. You've proven yourself to me time and time again. I just trust you. God, you both know that trust is a thing that comes and goes, and our emotions have a strong effect on that. So help us. Help us take those emotions and be able to see through the tears like Mary did to your face, and see the hope that you're giving us in that moment. Emotions don't go away, but you're there regardless. Thank you so much. Help us, because we need your help desperately. We'll end up with a lot more scars and wounds without you than we ever have. You are indeed the healer. You heal our wounds. Emotional, spiritual, physical. You've healed so many things. I know you're not done with us yet. So have your way with us. Help every single person at Live Oak Church follow you and wrap our lives around you. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your kindness. I love you. It's in the name of Jesus I pray. Amen.